Boom bop pow. Welcome back to the Point Taken podcast, guys. We have a really awesome episode for you. We had three special guests on today. We had Mr. Cody, Evan, and Jake. We're talking about some sensitive topics today. We did get into some of the nitty gritty, the details, some graphic content. So here's just a little heads up. If PTSD is something that you struggle with, or you're very easily triggered, come into this knowing that, and gently. Let's get into the episode. Can you give us a little background on why do we have the three of you guys here with us today? What's your testimony within this?
So I'm 30. So I got 15 years of EMS. I have an EMT license. I've been working for the fire department for going on a decade. Been on the ambulance off and on the whole time. So that's why we're here. I guess I've seen
a lot of things.
I've seen one or two things.
Mm-hmm. What about you, brother?
So I did a stint with the Marine Corps Infantry. I was with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines when they were in Sangin in 2010 and 2011. I only say those details because people can go look it up in the news. Mm-hmm. It was the most kinetic deployment that Marines have had since Vietnam, and that bore out in the casualty rate. Mm-hmm. So that would be the background. I have never had PTSD. However, a lot of my guys have, and justifiably so, I think. But and I've helped a lot of people through it. So after I left the Marine Corps, came back here, I kind of started a self-defense ministry. Didn't mean for it to be a ministry, turned into a ministry. Yeah. Was going to be a business, and it turned into this thing where I'd get weird people come to self-defense classes. It might sound weird, but like there's a certain kind of person that goes to a self-defense class. Yeah. And a lot of people that need self-defense classes don't go to self-defense classes, or it's a class that's not actually going to be helpful to them. So I was trying to bridge that gap, and what it turned into is a lot of people needed to talk about some stuff or work through some stuff in order to even do that kind of stuff.
Jake, I feel like you're the most qualified. Can you explain PTSD? Define it?
Can I define it?
Yeah. I feel like of all of us, you've probably...
Post-traumatic stress disorder. So it'd be a disorder that,
if you hook it on phonics, I'm sure I'll pick it up eventually. I wasn't a Marine, but...
So it's uncontrolled stress as a result of a traumatic event or prolonged exposure to traumatic events. Is how I guess. Yeah. Just making something up right now.
Again, like I said, I felt like you would be the best one to spitball a ballpark definition, whereas I don't know, but I wasn't going to speak for you, Cody. I was going to drop the ball on that. Let's be honest.
At least you're honest.
Yeah. So what's your experience with that, Cody?
Mine's similar to Evan. Been with the fire department for going on 9 years now. I've had my EMS license since 2014, so I've had that for 10 years. Grew up with a dad who suffered from PTSD from his combat tours. He was in the 82nd Airborne, so October of 1983, Operation Urgent Fury down in Grenada when they went and rescued the hostages with the Marine Corps down there, and then some other stuff over in Africa that he couldn't talk about.
What was the time period?
Time period of
this stuff in Africa.
Jake knows it.
Between 79 and 83. So, yeah. And then just seeing things that I've seen, around being in the job. It's never, not always easy, especially when you start dealing with kids and other stuff. The kids are always some of the worst, but that's, about where I stand with that.
Is that something that you feel like you have had to struggle with yourself?
About 100%. Okay. 100%. Not to go off on a tangent, but or a little rabbit trail. There was a period of time that we had quite a few bad calls come out. So my dad passed away in August of 2017, and then we made 3-car accident right after New Year's. So in January 2018, had 2 people burn up in a car. There was one that was had her head split open, and then the other guy had 3 second and third degree burns, degloving on his foot, huge lacerations, an open tib fib fracture, and then a couple months later, had another one that was another bad wreck that we ended up having to extricate somebody or cut them out of the car, and then going down to that following Christmas, we made a head-on collision on 14 when they were doing all that construction where it was down to 2 lanes, and it was a head-on collision between a Mercedes and a little RAV4, and we were working the wreck, getting Mom taken care of because she was completely unresponsive, and they had a little 2-year-old that was in the back that was in a car seat, and then as we were taking care of her and got the kid out, I looked down and I was like, what is that? And I picked it up, and it was a kid that was folded up in the floor. And unfortunately, that was, I think it was the 23rd of December, so days before Christmas. And unfortunately, he didn't end up making it. I think he was 5. But going along those lines of those things and how it all just transpired, going back to what Jake said about a prolonged stressor, or being involved in a prolonged stressor, and it's subjective because everybody handles it differently. What may be traumatic to me, it may not be traumatic to Evan,
right?
And vice versa. So this one in particular, I woke up one night in the bed hall hearing that little boy call my name, and about 1:30 in the morning, I was like, what is that? And I sat there and I said it again. I was like chills, shiver down your back. Like I went, yanked up the curtain of the bed hall, and I was like looking. I was like, "Where's this?" So did a little kid just get into the fire station, just run around that happens to know my name, and then just certain sounds and stuff, smells. After that burnt car wreck. I mean, I don't know if anybody. I don't know how graphic we need to.
As honest and graphic as you feel comfortable.
Oh well.
Cowboy up, boys.
When you've got someone who gets fatally burnt, especially to the point where they're unrecognizable of what sex they are, if they're male or female, or how old they are. It smells like burnt barbecue. If you take a pork shoulder and throw it in the fire and just let it rip, let it burn. That's what it smells like. So after that one car wreck where we had those 2 people burn up, I didn't eat barbecue for probably a month and a half. It just wasn't appetizing. Every time I smelled it, I was like, ugh. It just didn't, wasn't super great. And then, of course, just random, when we were on that wreck, the car caught on fire before we got there. We got there, and it had started burning the power lines above us. Wow. So we're telling she's like, hey, y'all got to move them out of the way because you're about to be riding the lightning per se. And, we were pulling it back. I grabbed a sheriff's deputy, and this guy's just screaming the whole time because obviously he's got some major injuries. But I mean, for probably 2 months, I just randomly hear that dude screaming, just not cool, man. And it'll eat you away if you don't go speak to somebody who's been in that type of situation, or go see a therapist or a psychologist, which I did. Ended up getting all that squared away. Took a little bit, but
Now is that do you see somebody independently, or is that provided through your work? Or
so we have you can choose to go independently. We have a EAP, or Employee Assistance Program, that they use. Now I will say that she was not geared towards military or first responders. She was just a basic, I guess, life counselor, therapist, whatever. So there was a little bit of a disconnect on certain things. She's like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I do understand, because I don't, because I've never been in that situation. But now we've got peer support teams and stuff on the fire department, or at least with our department. A group of guys went to a counseling / de-escalation class up in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and they went through and got everything they needed to help the guys in our department, and they do that on their own. They don't think they get paid for it or anything. So if something happens, bad incident happens, they'll do a debriefing, and those guys will show up and kind of help everybody work through it, be an asset for them.
Do you guys have a stigma among paramedics and firefighters about talking about something that sits heavy on you? Because under the military, until very recently, between the stigma and having good in-house support and the military recognizing, hey, this is important and we need to push guys to do this. Until very recently, those two things just kept,
100%.
You're not a Marine if you're talking about stuff. You deal with your own crap.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I know he can test. A lot of the old heads were like, man, these guys like, I don't know what you're like. Okay, it's part of it. Gets the job.
Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up, move on, get your stuff back on the scale. We got another run to go on, and then
it was usually funny. The old guy would find something that would like really catch you off guard, like, "Hey, go pick that helmet up." And some dude's head's rolled around in it, and you get some guy that didn't expect it. And he's in the corner like distraught, puking his guts up, and 4 dudes are laughing at him. Like that's kind of more the generation of fire department I came up on.
Yeah, same. And now it's really, like you said here, till recently. I think there's been over the past 4 to 5 years, there's been a big move on being more conscious. Thank you. Of the repercussions and the issues that come with PTSD, because there's been big movements with the 22 ruck. 22 veterans a day commit suicide as a result. So there's all kinds of stuff out there for that. I know Reverend Warriors does it, and they have quite a few other ones. Fire departments are all getting into it because it's notably it's really starting to affect people. And now that it's more open, because you used to not talk about it, you used to just tuck it away. I remember my dad telling me growing up, he's like, you don't talk about that. It's like you just you figure it out, you get over it, and you go on. You can just kind of push it back and compartmentalize it in a little box and go on about your life.
Yeah, because I can understand like the idea behind introducing the new guy to something terrible, but so how do we bridge that and ease people into that type of line of work where you can deal with those things in a better way rather than forced shock value and stuff?
A little bit of it is training and quality training, but I think the reality is unless you're a sociopath, that's going to affect you. Because more than training, fundamentally, if you are spiritually not squared away, it'll get you at some point.
Absolutely,
it'll get to you at some point. I'm 100% positive. That's the only reason I never ended up with PTSD, is that I didn't know a whole lot at 22, but I knew God was sovereign and really internalizing that. And I was solid in my identity as a Christian. That's not about firefighters, but
that's 100% consistent when you think like high stress, bad decisions, things that happen. Knowing what defines you and it being Christ first. Because the thing that gets a lot of guys is the job defines them. Man, he is, an
I don't
awesome
do
firefighter.
I am a firefighter.
He's an awesome Marine. He's an awesome firefighter. And then you look at their personal life, and it's absolute trash. The world's burning around them, but they're good at their jobs. Like, that's great that, for the next 25 years, you'll be really good at what you do. But when you leave here, no one will care anything about what you did or what you're doing now.
Yeah, and
it's about what you built.
16 broken marriages and
4 kids that don't talk to you.
Yeah, it's just,
and that's not a little thing. Like in my opinion, the vast majority of dudes that have trouble coming out of the military, it's not PTSD, because most of them haven't seen anything, or not justifiably, The guys getting diagnosed with PTSD who their buddy they went to boot camp with on another unit, another deployment, was blown up and they have PTSD for it. Like, oh, were you there? No. Did you see it? No. So you knew this person who went through something bad, and the reality was, if you dig through that, like, they got out of the military, them being 18, coming out of high school, they don't have an identity yet.
Right.
They go into the Marine Corps, they latch onto that because it's the first really hard substantive thing they've done in their life. That's what they are now, and then
I'm
they don't
a man
know how to
because
not
of this. And that's the thing, is like if you're identifying as I am a believer first, like that's where it starts. I got one of the guys I work with, he made the comment, he said, I was like, well, what's the trick to make sure you don't end up really messed up? Because he's coming up on 25 years. He's like, have something more than just the job. like take care of your family, be more than just your job. He goes, when I transition out of this job, I'm gonna struggle because I work every other day. I'm like, hadn't quite choose. Like for me with the paramedic things, like I don't save people. I give you the best statistical chance, and the rest is between you and God. I'm not going to take the responsibility of saving you, but that also, if I take the responsibility of saving you, that means I take the responsibility of you dying.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
I think it's a lot of people.
Yeah, and like so having kind of laid out of I'm a believer, God is sovereign, and then like for me. Like, I just expect to see something bad every time I go to work. On my drive, I'm going to see a dead baby today. Mm-hmm. I start there, because to me, that's the starting point of a terrible day. Or a day that's happened that was terrible, whichever way that should be said. Mm-hmm. So I always start there, and then every day that you don't see that, you're like, all right, well,
it's a better day.
But like, I've found the times that like things have really bothered me after the fact that has more to do with like I didn't know what to do in the situation. Like I wish if I had just thought this through, what I would do in the situation. It's making a decision in a panic state. And you're like, well, if I had more facts, or I wish I had a better idea what to do. But a lot of times when you think about, okay, when this happens, I'll make these steps. Even if you struggle through those steps, kind of mentally walking through that process beforehand, I feel like drastically dictates how things unfold.
Yeah, being prepped.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and general post-traumatic stress. Would you say, Evan, that you have dealt with the post-traumatic stress disorder at all?
Probably
Personally?
not.
Yeah.
Me and Jake actually talked about this. Like I've had things that have bothered me after the fact, but it hasn't created. Like so like instead of being stuck in the moment and not being able to move past it, I've ran into situations where it put me in a bind and I had to chew on it longer and process it out.
Yeah.
I think we would struggle to, like, I think the official defining parameters for a lot of that stuff aren't as hard, where they are clearly defined, are not clearly played out in real people, you know? So,
fair.
Like, I could say that I have post-traumatic stress things, you know, the smell of ammonia and stuff, right? The Taliban would make IEDs out of high ammonium nitrate fertilizer, right? That's in the smell of one of those going off, right? And I've been blown up probably 36 times. It was just the last one that was a doozy.
They got it. Yeah.
But
They were trying for a while.
you know, like weird thing, like some, you know, farmer burning a big old pile of whatever out, you know, where I live in Somerville. Like, well, that's some weird feelings, you know.
Yeah.
That can take you back there. But, you know, I think pushing those things to a disorder, I think we'd struggle to try to, you know, I mean, whatever we want to call it here in this discussion, you know, but I think you'd struggle to, like, turn that into a disorder as far as just defining it.
Yeah.
Maybe if outside of those circumstances, like it's random, like, you know, it's happening all the time, as opposed to
like without a trigger.
Yeah.
So like you've got like post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder are the same thing. Mm-hmm. So initially back
you said are or not?
They are.
Okay.
So in around the Civil War time, it was they called it a soldier's heart, I believe. Mm-hmm. World War I, it was shell shock, and that traveled all the way through Vietnam. And then the early 80s is when the post-traumatic stress disorder first came around. And then now, you know, you can't say disorder because it's offensive, and so the it's now post-traumatic stress. It's no longer post-traumatic stress disorder. But some people, it can be a disorder. For those who don't get the help and stuff, it can 100% be something that is just constantly eating away at them.
So you're saying it's the same thing in the letter, and just like it's called the same thing now, but do you feel like it is literally the same thing, post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder?
I'm splitting hairs, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that comes down to a personal situational basis. You know, it may be, for somebody, like I said, may be bad enough to where it's a constant thing that they're having to deal with. and then other things like smell of burnt rubber or ammonia or barbecue or whatever that makes you take you back to those places. It's kind of like I don't want to think about that, and then just go on because you've already addressed that. It's been put compartmentalized, and men are really bad about compartmentalizing things and not wanting to myself included, obviously. So yeah, I would consider them mostly the same thing. It's just how more of a prevalent it is.
Like I always think of the disorder of like when you get tied up and you can't move past. Like we got talking about a while back. Like there's a big difference between you freeze up and you're stuck in that moment. You can't get past it versus, oh, that's weird. All right, let's take a deep breath. All right, let's deal with this, and you move forward. Like okay, we're going to process that out versus, all right, I'm stuck on this and I can't move. I'm frozen here in this time or this space. Yeah. That's what I always think of when I think of like the weird things that show up afterwards versus like a disorder or PTSD. Like I always think PTSD is like something you're unable to resolve or unwilling to face and resolve.
Like psych ward worthy.
Yeah, but like I've seen some guys like I don't eat that.
Oh yeah.
Or like one of the guys, he's like, I don't eat gravy. Like, well, why is that? It's like, you see in the inside of your skull? It's like, I don't eat gravy. It's like, all right, fair enough.
I mean, but unresolved trauma.
Right, but it's just like
lots of people have unresolved trauma. It's when it builds up and now it's affecting you even without those triggers.
Right.
Yes.
Like it's always kind of this lingering.
Like you have an order to things. Something happens. It causes you to feel this way. Boom. But disorder means without order, so without need of something to trigger it.
That's the way I always thought of it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Somewhere I've always fallen on it.
Well, regardless, my question would be, and Jake, you mentioned that you have helped people through some of these things that they've had to deal with. What are some practical tips, or how is it that you helped guide them through that to help overcome?
Well, it's processing. You have to be able to. The thing is with trauma, right? And I think everyone, well, the guys at this table, it's easy to point to a mutilated human body by whatever means, car crash, explosion, bullet. It's hard to, you can't fabricate that image. You can go to the worst movies and it can be a whole lot worse. Hollywood can't reproduce, what happens to the human body in various circumstances every day. That's an easy one, but it can be emotional abuse, prolonged emotional abuse, a really rough situation that happened one time. There's a lot of things that can induce that. It could be something that almost happened.
Right.
It's not even necessarily something that did, but and
your brain just realizes the reality of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So either, right, dudes who do it as a profession, and you compartmentalize it, you put it in the compartment, and that's processing, right? It's in the compartment,
quote unquote. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as the compartment don't fill up, we're okay, right? And as long as the structural integrity of the compartment doesn't.
And here's 3 inches of rope, 6 inches of rope. Now you have 3 feet. Now stand on the chair.
Right.
I'm gonna go to the hardware store, grab a hammer. But whether it's that, like I'm intentionally not processing because I don't have time right now. I'll do that when I retire, or I'll do that tomorrow. You know what? Tomorrow I'll do it the next day. Either that or don't know how to process. How do I begin to process? What do I even do with this? Either way, it's unprocessed. It's unprocessed trauma, and what I've noticed is people carrying on over time. That almost becomes stronger the more it isn't dealt with. But the inverse is true if you can start to figure out how to process it. Like what some military guys will do is they will record themselves stepping through whatever incident it was, maybe multiple incidents, right? They'll record themselves, and it'll be like in a as if they were reporting it to a superior officer, right? On this date, I, Lance Corporal Jake Romo, was on a foot patrol in saying at whatever, as many details as they can. This is what and then this stuff happened. This is what it smelled like. This is what I looked to my left and saw, right? And they'll listen to it every once in a while. And the intention is to put yourself back there in that space. And okay, until this is something that happened. It happened. This is something that happened. And okay, now it's normal that this happened, right? It's not compartmentalized, and I'm fabricating a normal, right? That's what compartmentalizing is. Put that aside, because normal's over here. Right,
and this is outside of that, and it doesn't fit within my parameters of what should be.
Yeah. Beyond that, your body holds trauma too. There was a woman I worked with who ended up coming to the church here later, Barb, and in the early days, she was older, but she could tango with the self-defense crew, and she would be fine and that could be as simple as somebody touched her, not even in like a martial sense, right? But just touched her wrist, and it was the right one, not the left one, right? Whatever.
Right.
And instantly, oh yeah, everything's fine. To conditioned black, can't talk, not hearing, like a puddle mess of a human being, right? Empty shell, it takes an hour to recover, right? That level of, just from
grabbing of the wrist,
or whatever, because that is associated with a particular traumatic event that, from extreme compartmentalizing and just the sheer trauma of it, she blocked it off. She's forgotten about it until that happened in one of our classes, and it took her a good long while to begin processing that and walking.
Oh, she had forgotten that any of that had ever happened because it was so compartmentalized.
It was so, yeah.
Wow.
It was, yeah.
People take horrible things and they forget.
Yeah.
Like my short-term memory's atrocious. If you're like, well, what did you do 2 weeks ago? Or I couldn't tell you.
Right.
I have no
Couldn't tell you what you have for breakfast.
Yeah, but then we'll pull up and we'll walk to a house and it's like, this is familiar. There's that there. There's someone here, and I'll walk in. I'm like, oh, okay, I recognize them, and it'll come back. So it's like, I will put this in the box. I will set it over here, and when I need it, I pull it out. But till then, I don't need it now.
Do you think we do that consciously?
Yes and no.
Kinda, because it kind of shows up of, like, I don't want to know anything that happens after the fact.
Yeah.
Like, if I have a stroke right now and y'all carry me down and throw me in the car, I would not want, like, I wouldn't be like, hey, make sure you tell them, I'm laying in bed, I'm like, hey, can you call and tell the paramedic thank you so much for what he did for, like, I wouldn't want to give the backstory, because, like, for me, it goes from, you go from being a patient to a person that I'm familiar with. Like, the best advice I ever got was, I had an uncle that was in the Marine Corps, and he told me, he goes, you don't look dead people in the face. So he's like, just trust me, the line of work you're going in, don't look dead people in the face, and find a routine. Like, okay. But here we are, 15 years later, and I think I can recall maybe 10 faces of people that have passed.
Wow. Yeah.
But, like, the whole thing was, he's like, you will remember a face, so it goes from being a situation that you remember what you did to remembering the person. And people always talk, well, I saw the face of the dead person. And he's like, well, if you're gonna have to see the face, look it upside down. Your brain doesn't process a face the same way. So, like, for me, massive difference. I end up having conversations with guys that are rookie coming on fire departments. Usually the first thing I tell them, we don't look dead people in the face. If you have to look at them, you look upside down, find yourself a routine. When you get off work, go shower, go change clothes, change shoes, whatever you have to do, that there's something that helps you change hats, because you want to be able to compartmentalize it. And when it's time to pull that out, you should be able to pull it out quickly and effectively and make it useful. but when you don't need it, like, I hate this story, but it's so I came out and told a guy that his daughter had passed, and she had 2 small kids, but she passed on the toilet. I was like 3-4 years in the fire department. My girls hadn't been born yet. And so this guy's like, yeah, we're just worried about her. We haven't seen her since yesterday. It's like, okay. So I literally walk out the front door and go, hey, man, she's gone. I walk back in the house. That's how I told the man his 30-year-old daughter died. Like, and I didn't understand what the problem was. Like, I told him, she's not here. She's passed. She's dead. And one of the guys that worked with me, he was a believer. He tore me a new one. But it, after having my girls, like, realizing that is not
right.
But it's almost like you just pick up this shield of hate that, like, okay, well, this keeps me here and you over there, and I don't want any overlap. So it's like finding the weird. There's a time and a place for everything, but being that hard and not being able to let that down. And I feel like that's the thing that Christ calls us to do, is there's a time for our humanity, and there's a time that, I'm sorry, this is going to hurt, this is going to suck.
Yeah.
I hate it for you, but this is what we're going to have to do. Like, if you're resetting a bone or splitting somebody or pulling somebody out of a car, oh, it hurts so bad. Yeah, I know, it hurts. I'm sorry.
It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's just wait.
Take a deep breath. This is going to suck.
In Ecclesiastes, it tells us there's a time for everything, a time for mourning, a time for sorrow, a time for joy. And in 1 Peter, it tells us when we teach, it even speaks about what the Spirit is, that when we correct, we need to be able to do it in gentleness. And when we teach,
Yeah, and like speaking truth in love. Yeah. Like, Jesus was kind. He wasn't nice. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is going to hurt just a little bit. Just take it easy. Hey, this is going to hurt. I'm so sorry, but this is going to hurt. And like my daughters by far have taught me how to process that more than anything else. Like, we went to my oldest, like, hey, am I going to get a shot? Yeah, baby, you're going to get a shot. So then it gets time for the shot, and she looks at me, she goes, is it going to hurt? I said, yeah, baby, it's going to hurt. Take a deep breath, but it's going to be okay. Because, like, as we grow up, and, like, as we process life, like, the hard times are what makes the challenges. Is like, there's so many times things absolutely suck, but they make some of the best stories.
Yeah.
Like, I got lost, I almost froze to death. I walked 4 miles. It was so cold.
Uphill both ways.
Yeah, but it was awesome. I had this experience. It made me, my favorite thing is we used to go backpacking all the time, and we went and backpacked like 50 miles in 4 days. Right. Someone was like, well, what was the best part? I was like, the best part was coming back and using a toilet. Porcelain gold. But it makes you so much more thankful for the simple things. So having that thought out and just acknowledging that sometimes things are just not going to be fun.
And having the same spirit of, when you said Jesus is kind but not nice, the first thing I thought of was the woman at the well. And when he says, go and tell your husband, she said, oh, I don't have a husband. And he says, yeah, you're right. You've had 5, and the one you're with now isn't your husband. He wasn't saying whore. Yeah. He was saying this is the truth. And he also didn't say, yeah, honey, I'm sure you've made some mistakes.
Right.
He said, this is the reality of your life. You've had 5 and you're with somebody who isn't. And then through that, whole experience and interaction, that woman was brought, and that entire town was brought
with
to Christ.
Such patience. But when he spoke to the Pharisees, it was a level of harshness that exactly needed to be there. Yep. So, I mean, like I said,
woe to you. You made them twice as fit for hell as he was before you came.
There's a time for everything, right?
Yeah.
And that was a big driver of my mentality before we went to Afghanistan. And I was also blessed with the specific people that were around me and above me when we went, because they were experienced guys. And they were experienced guys who knew how to process stuff and not end up on the wrong side of things emotionally, psychologically, mentally. And so, if you think about it cognitive dissonance is definitely a contributor to, right? Like, well, I know I'm going to see some people chewed up. not that chewed up, right? Like, and then you see it. There's a disconnect between what you thought as bad as it could get, and then right, that's but the combat side of it, right? Young guys get amped up, right? Either through themselves because of the movies that we have in this country, or around each other, right? Or the command amps you up, right? Because they
started with one really smart guy. 4 dudes later, you don't even have one brain between the 4 of them.
But they get all amped up in different ways. Like, oh, we need to hate the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. So, because if they're evil, then
all this is a little bit more justified,
or at least those Marines will pull the trigger, right? Yeah. And that was not my mentality going in, right? So I do not need to hate these people, right? Because I don't, right? I read about Afghanistan and the gorgeous place that it used to be. I knew that there were some people that were oppressing other people, right? And that, okay, if these people that are being oppressed want us there, then it is justifiable for me to protect them, right? So there's a justification, there's a true justification to be had there. Mm-hmm. That some of us could not come back, right? We had peace in that, with relative peace within our platoon, and the specific trauma that some people had was specific disconnects, right? There's one pair of dudes, absolute just best friends in the weirdest kind of way. One was a goody two shoes kid, his best friend in the whole world, and I mean like attached at the hip. Their wives joked that they were more married to each other. But the other dude was actually straight up like out of the movies. Okay, you can go back to prison or you can join the Marine Corps, kind of a thing. Like, tatted down both arms. He'd done hard time for fighting cops, and we'll call him the rough around the edges guy. He was convinced that if one of them wasn't coming back, it was him. Well, it was the other guy, and that's what jacked with him, right? It was like, I could die, I could get messed up, but not this guy, because he had become the anchor in that guy's life, right? Like, he's the anchor of goodness in an otherwise, self-jacked up life. And I mean, we can see that as Christians, what went wrong there, right? It was the wrong cornerstone put under, your emotional well-being. Cognitive dissonance. Yeah,
every like any job that puts these high-level stresses, essentially the core value you have to say is, everyone else matters more than me. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not willing to do the job unless you're willing to say, I don't matter. The focus of what's going on will matter more than me. And if you can't say that when you're doing that job, you probably shouldn't be doing that job. Like, there's no way around that. Because, there's a running joke on the fire department is firemen don't die by themselves. You always die in twos, because there's always the other guy trying to save the other guy. So if one goes down, there's always one trying to help him. Right. So usually both of them get taken out. So it kind of snowballs that way. But like, if you don't, like I said, it still comes down to, where is your identity found? If you're standing in sand and that's what you build your entire existence on, it's just a matter of time till it comes falling down. And you can't, and if there's nothing to cling to, like, that's how people end up climbing inside of a bottle. Mm-hmm. And they just can't get past, I didn't deserve this, I wasn't worthy of this. Yeah. It's like, hey man, guess what? No, you aren't. You're not worthy of the breath that you expel every moment. And that's the gift of God. If you don't realize that or recognize that, you'll always be drowning.
So in the lens of helping and ministering to people who have PTSD, and even those who may have that and are listening right now, when we try to answer somebody who has PTSD and somebody, or just post-traumatic stress, and they say, why, or even in your example, like, why him? There's like the bitterness that might come with, how do I help somebody cling to God and trust God and love God when there's that bitterness of, why did this happen to me? That little wall there between them and God.
Start with honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it's not supposed to be that way. Yeah, it is. That's how God designed it. It is that way. I'm sorry. That sucks. But the truth of the matter is, you still have to stand in truth. Truth can stand on its own, and if we don't lean into that, like, you're always drowning if you have nothing to cling to. So it's like, for me, sometimes it's, hey man, I'm sorry, that sucks. But regardless of, you feel like it should have been you, it wasn't. So you should live that to the fullest. And God loved you enough to give you another breath. I mean, sometimes that's all there is to be had.
And people don't really take the ramifications of God's sovereignty in relation to the hard jobs.
Yeah.
They don't really think that through. Well, God is sovereign in all things. Okay. And we can kind of deal with self-sacrifice.
Right.
Okay. I will die for this cause, or I will put myself where I could lose an arm for this cause, whatever that is, within the scope of this job.
Oh, heaven forbid.
Right. But am I really willing to let everything go, everything, for trust in the sovereignty of God and His plan? What am I really, in my own head, am I willing to relinquish my own children to the plan of God? Right? Because that's a reality, right? Lightning strikes happen, you know what I mean? How much do I really, have you really accepted that and are willing to put yourself, really everything out there for that as a foundation, right, in your thinking?
Right.
Because it's not just about you. Like, you think, like, the ultimate thing is my self-sacrifice. No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, and then going back to what you said about the sovereignty, like, I like using this example with a lot of the newer guys is, and there's probably some people that are going to listen to this have no idea what I'm talking about, but punching your card, time clock, you just walk in, punch your card, stick your in the little slot, right? Going back to what he said, like, there's people that we call them paragods jokingly, that they have a God complex of, like, I did this and I did that. I'm like, dude, it's ultimately up to the guy upstairs. Like, when he decides to punch your card, that's it. Like, we have no control. We are here for whatever finite amount of time that we are, what he sees fit, and then go through that. And a lot of the guys that come in with the mentality and the faith seem to do a lot better in the fields and don't have as many, like we said before, don't have as many issues.
We lost somebody last year, and
G Lieutenant, right?
Yeah, it was like a 9-day difference between everybody was on the struggle bus for a good long while, but being a believer doesn't mean you don't suffer. It just means, it's the steak is delicious and everyone gets to enjoy the steak. Because I'm a believer, I get to go, how good is steak, and then how good is the God that gave me steak and allowed me to eat it and be able to enjoy it. So being able to take it down another level, like watching guys just suffer and not be able to climb out of the headache they were in, and I'm like, half the time I'm looking around like, why is everybody still just stuck? But it's the entire time your faith dictates everything. I was telling the young guys, like, you have to have a reason why. Your reason why dictates the entire direction that you take your life. I'm a believer, so therefore I will do this, I will do this, I will do my best to honor God, I will be faithful to my wife, I will raise my children in the Lord, because that's what God has called me to do. Well, how come we don't do cocaine? It's because God called me to be more than that.
Yeah.
And whether it happened before, but now. Well, you screwed up yesterday. You cussed somebody out. Yeah, I did. But you know what? God loves us, and even though I'm a hypocrite, there's still grace for me the same way it was the moment I was born to the moment that I exhaled my last breath that he gave me.
Today's a new day. I can be more like him today. You know?
And I think a piece of advice that I feel like I would give is that I wouldn't want to see somebody use bitterness or anger towards God for allowing something traumatic to happen to keep them from processing as an excuse to say, well, if God is so good, if God is so loving, then why is it that he died and I lived? Why is it that, I was in this situation or saw this or felt this or whatever? I think it's really important to remember that the God of the New Testament, Jesus, who a lot of unbelievers to me have called the Kumbaya God. But Jesus, that same Jesus, is the God of the Old Testament who said, go into Canaan, kill all of them, wipe them out. Jesus was there and he said, agreed. The same Jesus of the New Testament is the same God of the Old Testament who sent a flood to wipe out every single living person and creature minus one family and two of each on a boat, and wiped them all out. And if you really want to know what your attitude towards God should be for allowing things to happen that you don't want to happen, I recommend reading Job chapters 39 through 43. Probably my favorite passage of the Bible, where God says, this is who I am versus this is who you are.
Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Mm-hmm.
Yes. Like, were you there? Because I didn't see you. It's like, who is, and then Romans 9, who is the clay to say to the potter, why did you make me this way? Or why did you use me in this way? And that's kind of a heartless answer to, a heartless question. It's like, here's your straight up answer. Who are we to say to God, hey, why are you using me this way, or why did you put me in that position?
And for Christians, that can be a struggle. It's like, you know what? In my head, I accept this, that God has a purpose for everything, including this trauma, including this current struggle, whatever, including my struggle with the trauma, right? God has purpose in this. Okay, but it's hard for it to work its way down here.
It's pride. It's pride that I have too, because when I read Romans 9, you know what my first sinful thought is? What a cop-out. That's my first sinful thought, is like, what a cop-out. Like, who am I to question? Like, I can't get an answer. You know what I'm saying?
Deserve an answer?
Right. And so it's just like, you have to let go of that pride and understanding. Like in Jeremiah, it says that the heart is a desperately evil and wicked thing, and it seeks and seeks and seeks to deceive you and to keep you from peace with God. And God is a God who we call it dispensational theology, but he dispenses knowledge at the time that it needs to be known. So just because you don't have every answer right here, right now, is not an excuse for you not to process these awful things that have happened, no matter how scary it is. Sometimes it's a lot easier to say, well, I shouldn't have, man. When I went through something terrible, the only thing in my head that I thought, I shouldn't have to deal with this. I shouldn't have to cope. Like people said, you need to learn how to cope with this and this emotion and this emotion. It pissed me off. I was like, I shouldn't have to. Like this, I shouldn't have to be in this situation. Like, I shouldn't have to learn how to handle this and do that because, it just made me upset. Mm-hmm. And there's just that pride in what you said, like, this is outside of the normal. You compartmentalize it over here, and your reality is still over here, and say, this is what's real, and anything that happened in this box doesn't belong, which isn't the case. What happens has happened, and blaming somebody else or blaming God or, having that bitterness or anger will not help you process and will not bring you any closer to peace or reconciliation with that event.
I wonder how much.
You ever seen the claymation about like the process of grief, like processing grief? You go through denial, then you're angry, then you're bargaining with God, and then you're like, well, I can't believe this happened. And it's like this entire process. And like,
my bargaining tends to come before the anger.
Yeah. I'm ashamed to say it. I'm always angry first. The most humbling thing ever was hearing, like, oh, you realize that being angry is just a secondary emotion? You're more hurt. I'm like, no, I'm not. How dare you say something like that to me? That's why your mother didn't look. No. But like, again, you have to, when bad things happen, you have to realize there's going to be stages of grief, and you have to walk through those. Like, I tease young guys all the time on the fire department, like, you're going to go through the stage where then, like, everything's fun and it's exciting. He's like, oh, this is going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then you're like, hey, you really don't need to go to the hospital. This isn't important. Da, da, da. And they still want to go. And then they're angry with the people that want to go. And then eventually you just get to acceptance. You're like, all right, get your shoes. Let's go. That's fine. It's no problem at all. But like, you have to remember, it can be two things at the same time. In Revelation 5, it talks about who will open the scrolls, and John sees the Lamb, whereas the throne room sees the Lion. So, in just depending on where you're at is what you're seeing.
But I think the important part of what you're getting at is that you have to grieve.
Yes.
A lot of people
100%.
don't. You know, the grieving is a process, but it's also something you have to do. By the way, awesome, super short resource on grieving from a Christian perspective. James R. White. Actually, I think it's just called Grieving, starting with the sovereignty of God. And like, my wife and I went through it together just for, well, I'm not going to share that on here, but I realized through the process of that I hadn't actually grieved the loss of my legs from the things that come with that, right? Because you're like, oh, I know what I'm going to do after I get back from Afghanistan, right?
That's so multifaceted, man. Yeah.
You don't realize you hold on to that, right? Because as Americans, right, like, you have
the American dream.
Yeah, exactly. And you plan that out, and you have like, oh, okay, well, I'll make an adjustment here and there, not upside down.
Yeah.
No, you're going in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
No, you're not going to be a career Marine. You're going to be a children's minister.
Yeah.
Whose idea is this?
You're still taking children either way.
You're fired.
Taking care of children either way. Is that more? Yeah. That's a little.
Oh my gosh.
Well, going
edit. Jump
going back, like coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
You're talking about dealing with grief and everything. Like, you know, some people have coping. Like, sometimes it's booze, sometimes it's drugs, sometimes it's erratic behavior, just constantly doing stuff that's dangerous just to relive that invigoration and
Marines
thrill.
have that problem. Bad is the adrenaline junkie.
Mm-hmm. That's why you see a lot of them that end up in fire, police, EMS, or they skydive, or they go rock climbing without a rope, right?
Yeah.
You know, like all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's just
that individual.
Yeah.
The guy I mentioned who lost his buddy. Mm-hmm. He came back and doing some adrenaline junkie stuff. He ended up dislocating both his shoulders. And within a couple days, he was ripping up the 8-lane highway in between San Diego and Los Angeles, doing wheelies at 100 miles an hour. You know, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just
let her eat. Just
Well, that's prime time.
Is not physically capable of doing that. But he
needs to. It's the need to feel. Mm-hmm. Eventually, like, there's a guy I work with. He said, like, he'd been through some real bad calls, and his wife finally convinced him to go talk to somebody. And he said, like, eventually you take so much trauma that you can't process it. So it's literally like you just reach over and you're like, click, all the emotions are off.
Yeah.
But then you get to a point where you need to feel something. So, it's either drink it. Like they say the most addictive thing is falling in love. Like there's a reason why everyone, there's a lot of police fire. Like there's always the next relationship. Like toughing it out through a relationship to have depth and quality takes work.
It's tough.
Yeah. Finding someone to fall in love with for 3 months, trash them, end up with more emotional trauma, move on. People can do that all day long. Obviously, most of society's kind of on that boat now. But it's you have to process and deal with that. But if you don't, there's a desire to feel. So you're going to do whatever it takes to feel something. Because what's the Pirates of the Caribbean, we feel nothing. And eventually you get to the point where like...
What, you referenced Davy Jones' Locker?
Yeah.
Yeah.
they just want to feel something. And like...
Yeah. Well, I think you're touching on something too, is that for the guys who are going through that post-traumatic stress and who are married, there's a whole other side to that coin in our wives. I didn't realize the depth and scope of the stress that my wife felt from me being in a combat zone for years. That how much she was still carrying that, and then she's got to deal with my crap on top of that. If the dude's married and he's trying to make it work, there's a whole other side to that. Well, I say that because that should motivate somebody to, this isn't just you. It's not just your own head. And if it's affecting your wife, it's definitely affecting your kids.
And if it's affecting your wife, you think it's not affecting you, but it's affecting your wife and kids, and you're just unaware of it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times, your family's affected. Like, I joke all the time, the goal is just for my girls to grow up and not end up with my problems. Right. Like, I got to protect them from me. Every dude's like, oh, well, I got 100 ARs and this and that. It's like, okay, well, if the world ends, that might be great, but what about when you came home and ripped your kid a new one because you weren't feeling up to playing?
Yeah.
Or they made too much noise and you needed a nap. Like, you were the turd there, not them. So it's like, you have to stumble through the fact that, like, you have to accept the fact that you are dishing it out. Everyone's suffering from what you're going through regardless. And if you don't talk about that, like you said, your wife will end up carrying tons of it. And, whether you understand each other's feelings or not, still speaking about it matters. Like, processing that out. And that's the thing, is if you don't process it out, whether it's with your spouse or one of the guys you work with that was on the call with you, or go and talk to somebody, like, you have to process these things out, otherwise you just drown. I just realized you're wearing a West Tennessee skydiving shirt. That is superb.
Well, you're drowning, but you're also drowning them before you're drowning yourself.
As you stand on their necks to try to get your head out of the water, that's about what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So, Cody, you said that you had at the beginning of the podcast, you said that you had dealt with it and you'd spoken to a psychiatrist or a therapist or a counselor, or whoever that was. Is that something that you were able to work through? And if so, what are some techniques or anything that, in your experience?
Yeah, so the first big step is just talking about it. It's not always easy to bring that stuff back up, and once you get that going, it kind of just, the rest of it's just downhill. It's a kind of just rolls, and you just kind of roll with the punches. But and not everybody likes to go see a therapist. I tried talking to guys and that I worked with and everything else, and it just wasn't enough. It wasn't what I needed. They couldn't help me get back into that compartment to really pull the stuff out. Like, hey, why are you having these issues? Why are you dealing with this? I remember saying something in the session. She's like, "Oh, stop! That's absolute BS." And I was like, I looked at her, I was like, "What'd you say to me?" She's like, "No, I'm calling it. Like, that's bullcrap." And I was like, well, no, you're right.
Oh.
Okay, fair enough. I'll give you that one. But and sometimes your friends aren't going to be the ones to tell you that. Now, the good friends would 100% be like, hey, I'm not going to get into the exact details. I had a bad night just from a whole bunch of just compiled crap, and ended up come to me afterwards and they're like, hey, like, you're being stupid. Like, you've got to get this under control, because if you don't, like, it's just
Yeah.
You're about to lose your job, lose your family, whatever. And sometimes you don't realize that all that's happening. It's just you get in that attitude like, oh, woe's me, like it sucks, and so.
Because you can be rolling downhill and you just need somebody, even if they don't push you all the way back up, just to stop you. Like, hey, what you're doing is more detrimental and is not helping or solving your problem at all. Yeah.
And when I said going downhill, like once you get the ball rolling, I guess would have been a better analogy.
Well, I'm using a separate analogy with the same thing.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. I want to clarify and restructure that, but it does. I mean, having someone kind of snap you out of that does make a difference. And I grew up, like I said, my dad, had bad PTSD from being a combat vet and also a very jacked up childhood from what I've gathered after he passed away. And choosing not to address those issues, coming into it now, like looking back on it, like how much that affected me and my sister and my mom and then his family, and then how it all just kind of like just started running off little fingers of just all kinds of issues and stuff, that because he chose not to deal with it because he's part of that generation, you suck it up and go on.
Yeah.
So,
man,
the cold reality is nobody's lied to you more than you have.
Right.
And if anyone argues that, if you're 21 years old, I guarantee at one point you said, you know what, I'm okay, I can have one more.
Yeah.
And that's just, you screwed up, pal. You probably shouldn't have done that. But so often it's like, well, it's like what Pastor Jeff was saying this morning. It's like, I don't feel like it. Like, you know what? Sometimes I don't feel like doing it. I want to lay in bed all day. You know what? I was up all night. I should be able to just lay here and sleep all day. And like, that was the turning point for me. I had to realize, like, just because I had a hard night at work doesn't mean I get to come home and be a turd. Like, well, I was up last night. I was helping other people. Why should I have to help you, get the kids up? Maybe you should just be able to do it. I'm like, you know what? Maybe you should just cowboy up and love your family more than you love yourself. Isn't that what sacrificial love is? It's what God called us to be.
And it's not always about being a tough guy. Like you obviously you got tough guys galore in those fields. Suck it up, keep going. But also there can be a mentality of, well, I don't have time to deal with this. I got a family to take care of. I got a job to do, and talking about lying to yourself, right? But it's not from an egotistical point of view, just like, well, I don't matter.
Right.
I need to do the job and I need to take care of my family. Not realizing, not dealing with that stuff, is in a way, completely counterproductive to what you say your priorities are.
Definitely.
And I would say, even if you are open to that stuff being dealt with and being healed, I think my least favorite terminology or phrase I think I've ever heard is time heals all wounds.
Oh my gosh.
And here's why. Because time can help alleviate the immediate pain of all wounds. Time does not heal all wounds. Time is helpful and can distance, and because it can give you clarity. But if you've gone through terrible things and you're open to being better, but you're just waiting for it to happen, you can wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and everybody who you love, you can drag along with you, but it's not going to heal you or fix you. I'm a huge fan and proponent of intentional healing, of intentionality behind what are you doing in order to make yourself better.
Well, that analogy of a wound can be taken pretty far.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the wound healed. No, it became a big old mass of scar tissue, and now your arm doesn't work really good.
Right.
And
or it's infected, and now you're going to chop it off. Like, oh, good job. I'm so glad you took care of that one.
Now you're 45, and you got this big mass of scar tissue in your shoulder, and now it's causing a bunch of other trouble, and nerve pain, and a bunch of other. It does not heal the wound. It becomes an exacerbated problem, without dealing with it.
Yeah, and something I talked to, Anna from this podcast, her husband, I talked to him. He doesn't like his name being shared. But I talked to him, and something that he said that he does, he and Anna does, is he says, so my pain is at a 7. And Anna says, okay, you have X amount of days where during that time you process, you can take a step back in certain areas and you let yourself feel all of that, and then on, let's say that's 4 days, and then on day 5 you're back at it. And so that's a small minimized version of taking legitimate time to process and to grieve when something happens, instead of just ponying up. It's so important, and I think it's a theme that we've kept throughout this whole thing with all of you guys, is saying, Evan said they flipped this emotion switch. Jake said we compartmentalize. We feel afraid to turn those emotions back on, because when we do, we're going to feel the ones that we don't want to feel. But we were designed very intentionally by God. And you have to remember that the way that we were designed, every aspect of it, including our emotions and how that works, was intentionally done by God. We have these emotions and we feel these ways from these traumas because that's what helps us process and get through it. So when we try to take it into our own hands as this knee-jerk reaction to throw it in a box or flip that switch and put it away, we're doing ourselves and those around us a major disservice. And while it's terrifying sometimes, it can be terrifying to try and bring yourself back to that moment that had all of those emotions that we don't want to feel, or around those smells or around those things that make us feel that terrible thing. That is what will eventually help move you forward. And so having a specific time and saying, I am going to, and I like what you said, you were talking about dictating verbally. The advice I always got was writing it down. Just like journaling, or it's similar, but dictating that and bringing yourself intentionally to heal that and open that up. And then what Cody was saying, having somebody there who is going to help prod and help open, and knowing the right buttons to push to help you, because a lot of the time you don't even know what you need to open. Like, you can be alien trying, and you don't even know what.
Well,
what?
So,
are you about to be a hater?
No.
Yeah, it sounds like you were about to be a hater. You started snoring, and
it was not a snore. It was.
I got so insecure.
It was, because. So, it's not just...
It was empathetic.
Yeah, it was... I could feel what you're saying, and it was just heavy. So, a non-PT, a non-stressful thing, like my marriage the first time. I showed up with so much baggage that I was like, I took plenty of time, I processed this, everything's fine. In the first couple of years of my marriage, Hannah paid the price for a crazy person beforehand. But it was you don't realize how bad your baggage is. It's like you turn the light switch off, but it's the fart fan. Well, guess what? If you turn that fan off, it just piles up. It doesn't get processed out.
Right.
So, finding someone that can help you push through and ask them the questions and kind of piece through what's really going on. Why do you really feel that way? But you also have to feel safe enough to do that.
And I'll say, the way we talked about physical triggers before, and just from a practical standpoint, if people are trying to get advice from a podcast, you gotta be careful with that. Writing stuff down, recording your voice. Yeah, I think that's legitimate advice we can give. But physically, doing those physical, emotional things, you definitely want help.
Yeah. And
you want someone with you. An example, a girl I went to school with, went to high school with, she contacted me years ago because she was in a horrible car wreck, really, really, really bad, and she'd been suffering emotionally and psychologically from other stuff before that happened, and it was on I-40, so you can't get a lot of places without getting on I-40 without taking an hour, right? Yeah. So she first realized there was a problem when they were driving down 40, and they got within a half mile of that spot, and she just started flipping out. Yeah. Kicking, screaming, trying to get out of the car. She couldn't control herself. And so she called, and this was years and years ago. And like, I don't know. I didn't say that, but
Right.
like, okay.
The panic inside your mind, like, oh.
Okay.
Well, yes, tell
Okay,
me
friend.
more so I can sort some thoughts
Yeah,
out.
okay, my friend. I'm gonna give you a suggestion. I don't know if this will work, but and what I suggested, she have someone deliberately. They do it on purpose. They're gonna drive and stop on the side of the highway to that spot, and that she just stops and she sits and feels and processes, right? And then, that's it. And then they come back another time, right? Figure out how to do that, right? And physically inching your way to that spot, right? The physical triggers from some of the people in my self-defense class, right? We had to be real gentle and take a lot of time with it, depending on what it was. People moving around the room and just, hey, you're in a safe place, and depending on how bad it was, but that was just because they wanted to keep doing the class. If we hadn't had that deep level of understanding and patience, and hey, it gets as far as it gets, and being prepared to catch somebody when they fell emotionally, they wouldn't have gotten through it. So I struggle to say, like, hey, this is a solution for that. Like, you need help with it, and patience and grace and a community, but you need to work on it. You got to do something about it.
Community, like the Bible says. Oh my gosh. Is there spiritual?
Almost like it was meant to be or
Oh
something.
my gosh. Almost like there
Do
was.
not neglect your weekly meeting,
If there had only been a creator that could have pieced this together and told us what to do.
Confess your faults one to another
This
so
is a
that
safe
you
place.
may
It's
be
okay.
healed. Yeah.
Dude, I have an idea. We should get guys together and hold each other accountable.
Like a group?
Yeah. Dude, it could
I read
work.
about that one time.
The book, you might even say.
Some people.
That's sarcasm. If you're in Winton, not an accountability group, get in one.
That's right.
Yeah.
You need someone to reach up and smack you every once in a while. Your
Absolutely.
community matters because there's always a blind spot. Like, if you ever stood shoulder to shoulder in a circle, like if you stand shoulder to shoulder in a circle, so like 4 or 5 guys, whatever the guy in front of you, he can't see what's behind you, but the 2 guys beside him can. There's always a blind spot. That's why community matters. And even if you have 2, well, just me and my wife, we're good. Okay, well, when you stand back to back, there's still a blind spot for both of you. There's no way around it. There's always a blind spot. Without that community to give you truth, it has to come from truth.
So we've mentioned seeking professional help in guiding and helping you to process. We've talked about trying to remove those compartments and reconcile your compartmentalized trauma with the reality that you have forced upon yourself. We've talked about building a community and engaging in that and not neglecting that community. And then I want to say, don't forget your friendship with God. Remember, I talked earlier about don't be bitter against God and don't say, who are you to, question God, but just remember that God is a very personal God, and He wants us as friends. He calls us friend. I mean, that's not a claim that every God can make. And that's when I say God, lowercase g, but that's not a claim that a lot of religions have. Jesus is a friend to us, and what a good friend He is. In Hebrews it says, "For we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is tested in every way that we were, yet is without sin. Therefore approach boldly the throne of grace." This God is not a God who doesn't understand the things that we go through. He's not a God who doesn't care about the little things, because we can take the biggest thing in the world and compartmentalize it and think it's a little thing. And even if it is a legitimate little thing, God still cares. He is still a personal friend to you. So just don't forget, like what Jake was talking about, his advice to her of stopping on the side of the road near that place where something terrible happened and thinking and processing and feeling, also be praying and be with God and say, I'm going into this with you, not by myself, knowing and having faith that God cares about this. God wants to see you through this, and God very likely placed you there for a very specific reason.
I was about to say, God has purpose in it.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing like that peace that he gives us either going through that stuff. I mean, it is just truly something else.
It's sometimes hard to see in the midst of it, but nothing has just completely melted me and broken me down when God has allowed me to see the purpose in something that happened. When you finally see that,
that's a rare
I am
gift
undone.
Too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Do we have time for a story?
Yeah.
So, when I got hurt, well, the last time I've been blown up a lot, but I was in the hospital in Afghanistan. I don't remember how many days I was there. Then they moved me to Germany. They had me so drugged up. I thought I was there for 5 hours. I was apparently there for 5 days.
It's a long hour, buddy.
Well, it's a lot of surgeries for cleaning stuff out. So he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out.
Taste, color, see sounds.
Dude, ketamine is a big no-no. No. Yes, there are purple elephants. They are not your friend. No.
Stole my milkshake.
But there was some point when I was brought to Bethesda, it's Walter Reed, the military hospital outside Washington, D.C., and I think that's where it was, and I was thinking to myself, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. I really am okay. God, why am I okay?
Right.
Because, there's other guys next to me, and they're, like, struggling to hold it together, and, like, I was really okay. I was at a breathing tube in, and I was, like, trying to hand motion. This was going back to Afghanistan. Like, just got me stabilized, have breathing tube in, and I'm trying to, like, gesture with my hands. And someone had the bright idea to bring a keyboard over so I could, point to the letters and spell out my questions.
Yeah.
And I was like, how bad is it? Oh crap! I can't tell the joke I made. It's like,
is it still there?
I was like, I have 3 questions, right? Like, am I okay? Right? I don't remember the second one, and the last one was kind of a crude joke, but it was a joke. And they all started laughing.
Baby.
Yeah.
Was it the one about your boots?
No. But they all started laughing, and they were like, oh, this guy's going to be fine, or whatever. But anyway, get back to the States. I'm like, God, why am I okay? And that honestly wasn't like a hard prayer, right? But it was a prayer. It was just so lighthearted, like, God, why am I okay? Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't be okay. Why am I okay? And I'm loath to call it a vision. I'm loath to say that. But God hit me like it was something. God hit me with something. And it was it wasn't like my whole life flashed before my eyes. It was like 500 snapshots of my life all at one time to show that he designed me to take that hit. So, and specifically so it wasn't this other guy. And without telling the story of what happened that day, basically within a squad, my 3-man team, I was always the last guy in that team.
Yeah. And
for every single time, every single movement, it was Nick, Diego, me. Nick, Diego, me. That's just how we moved thousands of times. Get up from a knee, move to another spot, sit back down, always in that order. And 2 minutes before I got hit, the machine gun team leader, Diego, he's like, hey, Jake, you go first. I was like, hey, Romo, you go first. I'm like, it was so weird. I looked
before Nick.
Me and Nick both looked at him like, why? He's like, I don't know, change it up. Like, okay. And 2 minutes later I stepped, and obviously I've had to talk with him because he had some. And I was like, bro, it would have been Nick. He's like, I know, but it was still my decision. Bro, it would have been Nick. He's like, and he thought about that for a while because, we'll just say Nick was not designed for that. He struggled after, and if what happened to me had happened to him, I can't, reverse engineer God's creation, some alternate universe, but things might have been very different. And that's whatever. I don't need to second guess. God hit me with that. Like, see this that happened when you were 8 and this that happened when you were 12, and like put all that together. I'm like, you were designed for this. And so it wasn't Nick. Among other things. And since then, like, so much has happened that would never have happened in a million years. That all stemmed from me being in a wheelchair.
Almost
from
like he disciplines
experience.
the ones he loves. Discipline's not always bad. Sometimes it's instilling something in you.
Yeah. Preparing.
If you're not putting it in the frame of I was being disobedient, particular frame, and so he blew me up. As long as you're not framing it. But like in the sense of,
I knew I should not have gone first. What was I thinking?
That's more Zeus's forte.
in the sense of going through hard things so that it turns you into something for a particular purpose. Yes.
Because like I'm sure I guess 3 of us are still like, you're trying to teach your kids something, but you're having to discipline them in a direction.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I don't pick you up when you fall. You will get yourself up not because it's heartless. It's because I have to love you enough that you have to know you have to make the first step. You're not a victim. You have to make steps for yourself.
And that works not just for I fell down. Daddy's not mean because he doesn't pick you up. He's trying to teach you that, but it's not just for the small instances of I fell down. It's also for the large instances of I blew up, or it's this, that, or the other. Whatever that big trauma is, we can't say that God is just doing that for small things. When you have a big traumatic thing, a lot of the time we forget.
It's so hard to see in the moment.
Yeah.
But like, if you can look back at something that happened when you were 8 and you're like, this designed me to be able.
That's awesome.
This God had the foresight. Like, he had a plan and he was sovereign.
100%.
Creator of the
universe. I would never have remembered that. That was a miraculous blessing on my part, and it probably stopped a whole lot of, why me, oh God, on the back end, way down the road, and I've held on to that, and obviously it's part of my testimony, so there's purpose in that.
You think, he loves us. I'm not gonna jag it. Matt Chandler made a comment. He says, God doesn't stomp his feet every time you fall. When you watch a child learn to walk, every step the parents are ecstatic, and that's God's love. They don't say, why did you fall? You should have this figured out. Get up. It's okay, baby, get up. You can do it again. And every time it's a little bit farther. And we get, I don't know. Well, some people go a little bit farther. Some of us just, run the first step every time and have to have head trauma. But
some of us can't run.
I can't stand up to that.
Me neither.
All right. I think that was awesome, guys. If you guys liked what you heard today, if you have any thoughts or things that we didn't cover or things that we did that you'd like to tell us about, go ahead and drop a comment on the video. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you need somebody to talk to and you don't really know that first step, or you need somebody to help you, kick you in the butt to get that first step, you can always give us an email at listenpointtaken@gmail.com. That's also a really good way to send in some questions, as well as dropping them in the comments. But until next time, deuces.
I have one question. Do you know where my feet are?